In the tired little town of Harmony, Georgia, where the sidewalks cracked with age and the train hadn't stopped in years, there was a weathered bar room called the Rusted Crown. The letters on the sign were chipped. The screen door screeched when it opened, and the jukebox still played gospel tunes on Saturday mornings, almost by accident. But ask anyone around town, and they'd tell you the real landmark wasn't the bar. It was the old man who sat in the back corner booth. Every day, like clockwork, he'd arrive just before sunset, his gait slow but steady, leaning slightly to the right like a tree bent from a lifetime of wind. His clothes were always clean, but worn. The collar frayed, the buttons mismatched, the cuffs rolled halfway to his forearms, revealing hands hardened by years of work and loss. His name was Jeremiah, but no one called him that anymore. They just called him the old man no one loved. He'd order a cup of coffee, black, 2 sugars, and stir it long after it had cooled, as if it were something sacred. He barely drank it. He just needed it there, like a candle beside a grave. Now, Jeremiah told stories, wild ones, big ones, too big, people thought. He talked about a woman named Loretta, said she was the county's Magnolia Queen back in 1961. She had the kind of smile, he'd say, eyes closing with reverence, that made you believe God still walked the earth. He told of how they used to sing hymns while planting daisies in the front yard, how she'd hum Blessed Assurance while stirring chicken and dumplings, barefoot in their yellow kitchen, and how one morning she didn't wake up. The angels took her, he'd whisper, didn't even knock. Most people smiled politely and moved on, but behind closed doors, they rolled their eyes. That old man ain't got nobody. He's just making it up to pass the time. They called it sad. They called it delusional. They called it lonely. But not Rosa, the bar's cook. She'd sneak him cornbread and refill his coffee without charge. When no one was looking, she'd sit across from him and listen. Really listen. Do you ever get tired of the way people look at you? She asked one night. He just smiled and said, honey, when you've danced with angels, you don't mind being laughed at by men. And there were other stories, too, of a son, Jonathan, a heart surgeon in Ohio, who used to call him every Father's Day and send him letters written in blue ink. Of a daughter, Lydia, who opened a bank in California and mailed him Christmas cards with Bible verses written in the margins. But no one ever saw them. No visits, no postcards pinned to the walls. Just the old man, the coffee, and the stories that smelled too much like longing to be believed. You know that old man lies, the regulars chuckled. Jeremiah never argued. He just smiled softly, like someone who knew something they didn't. Then, one chilly morning in October, The booth sat empty. The coffee cup sat untouched. The bar was quieter than usual. Rosa found him with his head bowed over an open Bible, his hand resting gently on a photo of a young woman in a pageant crown. The Bible was open to Revelation 21, verse 4. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain. Now, word spread fast, but it didn't stir much until the next morning. Limousines, not one, not two, but six. 6 long black cars parked outside the rusted crown. The town stood still, stunned, as people stepped out in tailored suits and dresses too fine for Harmony's dusty streets. A man with steel-gray temples and a doctor's bag clutched to his chest. A woman in a navy pantsuit and pearl earrings, who walked like someone who's used to boardrooms and Senate floors, yet her eyes were red from crying. They entered quietly, reverently, and when they reached the booth, they knelt. "Hi, Daddy." The woman whispered, touching the old Bible, "I'm here." The doctor placed the photo back in his father's coat pocket and began to weep. The whole bar watched in silence. And then came the confession. "We thought he didn't want us coming," Lydia said, her voice shaking. "He told us he was okay. She said he had everything he needed. His memories of Mom, his faith, and his stories. He said he was waiting to see her again." "And we believed him," Jonathan added. "He never wanted to burden anyone. He gave us everything when we were growing up. We just thought he had peace." And suddenly, the stories weren't lies. They were proof. Proof that love lasts even when it's invisible. That grief can hold hands with hope. That a man who sat alone wasn't lonely. He was keeping vigil for the love he had lost and the Savior he trusted. He wasn't the old man no one loved. He was the old man who never stopped loving. Love that story. So, friends, in a world quick to doubt and slow to listen, the old man no one loved reminds us that heaven measures differently than we do. The town saw a nobody. God saw a saint who held on. They heard rambling stories. God heard a broken heart singing truth. They said, "He lies." God said, "He waits." Jesus said, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." And Jeremiah's life was like a sermon, not from a pulpit, but from a corner booth, not with eloquence, but with endurance. not in crowds, but in quiet love that never gave up, even when no one believed it. And now, now he's home. Loretta met him at the gates, barefoot, probably still humming Blessed Assurance. And somewhere in a little bar in heaven, the coffee's warm, the stories are real, and the booth will never be empty again. God bless you, my friends.